Hello, everyone, and welcome to this amazing celebration. We are celebrating 440 million people having participated in the Tuidang movement. Okay, that is the Quit the Chinese Communist Party movement that was started 20 years ago. And as a substantial portion of the Chinese population has actually gone through a very, very unique and interesting process that I personally believe is one of the bases for a future free and open China. Without further ado, I'll say a few words in a moment. My name is Jan Jekielek. I'm senior editor with the Epoch Times. And I'll be speaking in a moment. To start us off, I will actually ask our CEO of the Epoch Times, Janice Trey, to say a few words.
Thank you for attending this important seminar, and thank you for the distinguished speakers and everyone watching online. On November 19, 2004, the Epoch Times launched a series of editorials titled The 9 Commentaries of the Communist Parties. These commentaries provided an in-depth analysis and summary of the communist movements and the Communist Party, particularly the Chinese Communist Party, CCP. The series thoroughly covers different aspects of the CCP, including its ideology, history, culture, and practices. The 9 commentaries lead to a new level of reflections on the nature of the CCP, igniting a massive movement of withdrawal from the CCP, where Chinese citizens publicly renounce their membership in the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese Communist Youth League, and the Chinese Youth Pioneers. Using factual evidence, the 9 commentaries summarize the large-scale brutality and continuous inhumane practices committed by the CCP in its rise to power and governance over China. The series not only exposed the lies and propaganda by the CCP about Chinese history, but also guided Chinese people on a path to restoring true traditional Chinese culture. Since the publication of the 9 commentaries 20 years ago, about 440 million Chinese people have publicly declared their withdrawal from the Communist Party, the Chinese Communist Youth League, and the Chinese Youth Pioneers. And let me turn over to the distinguished speakers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janice. So we're going to start off our discussion with me thanking a very, very important organization in this, actually set up by this Congress, the Congressional Executive Commission on China. We have with us, of course, Chris Smith, that many of you will be familiar, is in charge of this commission. We have the staff director here with us, Piero Tozzi, and he's going to start us off. I also wanted to thank Piero and the CECC for actually providing us this room very graciously. Piero, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Well, thank you, Jan, and thank you, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I was going to just give a few thoughts on the broader implications of the Tuidang movement, and also which was inspired in part by the 9 commentaries. You know, Xi Jinping has spoken about the China dream, about the great rejuvenation of the Chinese people. Yet at the same time, his period of rule has really been characterized, I think, by a repressiveness, by a centralization of control of the economy, of economic life, of social life. And in many ways, a reversion to the ideological obsessions of the Maoist period, as Xi Jinping thought. And in response to this repressiveness, I think we've seen a number of things. We've seen in part a remonstration, you know, that the Confucian idea of remonstrating against the emperor. I think it was very significant that a year ago, Li Keqiang, and let's not make him out to be a hero. He was a member of the Politburo. He's a communist. Yet in some ways, he did represent a more popular resistance or an alternative within the Communist Party. And he said something very interesting and very threatening to Xi Jinping. He said, 人在干,天在看, if you remember. And if the people in Taiwan, sometimes they say, ooh, 人在干 doesn't sound that good, 人在做. But yeah, but that's what he said. Don't blame me. So, but you know, he said that, you know, men act and heaven watches. And if we're familiar with Mencius, Mengzi, and also the Shujing, there was this saying that heaven sees with the eyes of the people and hears with the ears of the people. And that when you have a leader who becomes a tyrant, a Bao Jun, he no longer is entitled to deference or leadership. He has forfeited that. He's lost the mandate of the people. Very interestingly, and under strange circumstances, a week after he gave that speech, Li Keqiang died. We don't know the exact circumstances, but we do note that it was something that caused a lot of people to take pause. We've also seen more active, just now in Henan, we see these young people bicycling, or just a month or so ago in Shandong, a lot of veterans there when there was a road rage incident there that was indicative of official corruption. So we do see a lot of kind of active movements there, a lot of ferment. But one thing I do want to focus on, though, because I don't think sometimes it gets as much attention because it's much more passive, and that's what we see, the Tanping movement, or the Bailan, you know, the lay flat movement, or the just let it rot, that a lot of people, in response to Xi Jinping's exhortations to work towards the Chinese dream, are just saying, meh. Now, we see in other countries, we see sort of this slackerism, and some people say, well, that's just sort of a Chinese version of slackerism. You know, if people go to Yunnan, was it Dali, kind of like the hippie haven, or to go hang out on the beach in Hainan. So certainly there is some of that. But there is also, I think, an active choice of passive resistance. You know, some of us who studied martial arts are familiar with the Wu Wei principle, where when you have superior force, instead of trying to meet it and getting crushed, you give way. And I think, you know, in some ways you can think of it in sort of Taoist terms too, this sort of a passive kind of giving way. But there's also a more active form of passive resistance, a more Confucian form, as it were. I think in the Analects it said that when good governance prevails in the empire, the scholar, the scholar official is in evidence. When it is without good governance, however, he withdraws. So in many ways, I think we are seeing a withdrawal, especially among the younger generation. And some people have talked about in Hu Wenhui's the garbage time of history, Li Shi Da Laji Shijian, right? We're also seeing, I think, in some cases, a demographic resistance. There was that very viral video a year or two ago of someone says, you're going to be punished, you know, up to 3 generations, and said, 3 generations, this is the last generation. Personally, I think that's very sad when people drop out and cease having children. I'm expecting our first grandchild any day now, so it's, you know, that importance of civilizational and cultural continuity is very important. But what should we do? What should the U.S. government do? I think in many ways, it's almost like doing nothing. Let things run its course. But what we shouldn't be doing is we should not be subsidizing tyranny. We should not be, for example, the U.S. government, we purchase, our Department of Defense and our Department of Agriculture purchases fish that is caught and processed with forced labor from China. What we serve on our military bases, what we serve in prisons and school lunch programs has been tainted with forced labor. So that's a day one thing that the Trump administration should do. Stop U.S. government purchases, stop subsidizing tyranny, and certainly our businesses should stop having forced labor in their supply chains. We have to rid ourselves of that. Now, I do want to point out that just today, DHS announced that they added 29 companies to the entity list that are utilizing forced labor. It brings it, I think, to 107 counts. I do want to give a shout out to Rob Silvers and his team at DHS, which has been very good in tracking forced labor and you know, so that we can identify what goods are made with forced labor, and we have to stop doing that. And we should stop making a false idol of stability. You know, one of the terrible mistakes I think that was made was when George H.W. Bush, in the aftermath of Tiananmen Square, sent Brent Scowcroft to Beijing to reassure the Chinese Communist Party that stability was important and don't worry about it. Never again should we side with the Communist Party against the Chinese people. Never again. Let things take their course. It is, I think, you know, there's what is it from the Three Kingdoms? Fen jiu bi he, he jiu bi fan. If it is, you know, to things to fall apart, let it fall apart. Let the party fall. But then again, you know, we talk about that Wu Wei principle. Allow that to naturally spring back. You know, just as, you know, it meets with repression, naturally there will be a reversion. And if we allow that, if we allow the party to fall, and we allow the Chinese people to spring back, then, and only then, without the Chinese Communist Party, will we see a true rejuvenation of the Chinese people. May democracy prevail. Minju Bishan. Thank you.
Piero, thank you so much. It took me quite a few years to figure out what exactly the Quit the CCP movement was doing, right? We have a situation here where, and we're going to have the president of the Global Service Center for Quitting the Chinese Communist Party speak in a moment exactly what they've been doing these 20 years. But we have a situation where essentially activists are going out into Chinese communities within China, overseas, tourists everywhere, and asking them to quit the Chinese Communist Party. Okay? People don't need to do this publicly, although some people do. They don't need to run in the streets. Their name gets taken into a private, secure database. Okay, but what is the meaning of this, right? And it's very interesting what Piero was just talking about, right? How to let things run their course. In communist societies, and many of you will be familiar with this, they're unbelievably hierarchical, of course totalitarian and hierarchical. And in this sort of situation, they actually actively act to compromise, let's say, the morals of every person involved. They put people in no-win situations again and again and again until their moral high ground is compromised, thereby being able to rule over the populace. So what I realized one day, and I think there are a few people here actually in the audience who helped me understand this Quit the CCP movement is actually a kind of a cleansing. It's an opportunity for people to say, yes, you've harmed me, Communist Party, but I am putting you behind me, right? And this is precisely, now we have 440 million people in communist China that are ready for the kind of future that Piero was just talking about. So without further ado, let me introduce Yi Zhengyuan, Yirong as I know her, president of the Global Service Center for Quitting the Chinese Communist Party, also known as the Tuidang Center.
Thank you very much. Greetings, everyone. It's my great honor to speak about the Tuidang movement, Quit the CCP, Quit the Chinese Communist Party, the largest peaceful movement in China today that has seen about 440 million Chinese people withdraw from the Chinese Communist Party and its affiliated organizations. First, please allow me on behalf of the Tuidang movement to express my sincere gratitude to U.S. government officials who have offered us their support and commended the Chinese people for their bravery in stepping forward and pursuing freedom. What's the Tuidang movement? The Tuidang Quit the CCP movement is an emerging non-violent grassroots movement in China that encourages Chinese citizens to renounce their ties to the Chinese Communist Party and its affiliate organizations, such as the Communist Youth League and Young Pioneers. The Global Tuidang Center, also called Global Service Center for Quitting the Chinese Communist Party, as a nonprofit organization registered here in the United States with our headquarters in New York. Our missions are to educate about the destructive characteristics of the communism, to assist all Chinese people worldwide to renounce their association with the CCP and its affiliate organizations, to set the Chinese people upon the path that will ultimately lead to a new China, a China without a communism. In 2004, the Epoch Times published an editorial titled Non-Commentaries on the Communist Party. For the first time ever, it provided a comprehensive analysis of the evil nature of the Communist Party. It concluded by asking Chinese people to make a withdrawal statement from the communists. Awakened and inspired by the non-commentaries on the Communist Party editorial, the Chinese people realized that the evil nature of the Chinese Communist Party and started making distinctions between China and the CCP, and more courageous Chinese people have started to renounce the Chinese Communist Party and its affiliated organizations. Up until today, so about 440 million Chinese people have quit the CCP. Through its history, the CCP has used violence and terror to establish and maintain its role over China. It has used censorship to control the information and propaganda to brainwash Chinese people. It's impossible to put into words the grave sufferings Chinese people have undergone. A conservative estimate yield like 80 million Chinese people perished without due to natural cause under the CCP's reign of terror. Millions of volunteers are helping people to spread the non-commentaries and to help people to quit the CCP day and night by talking to them, calling them, chatting with them over the internet, help people to register to trade on. It's our volunteers works like 24/7. They review statement in real times as they come in. And we have very serious registration, review and the statements. I should say that 3 withdrawal number is accurate and very serious. Why the Chinese people need to quit CCP? Almost everybody in China has been forced to join one of or 3 of the Chinese Communist Party and its affiliate organizations at some point. When a child is forced to join the Youth League, young pioneers, they go to school, they raise their fist and to make oaths that they will give their blood for the Chinese Communist Party, struggle their whole life for the Chinese Communist Party, or never betray the Chinese Communist Party. So it's from a very young age, Chinese people were brainwashed to believe that the Chinese Communist is China. Opposed Communist Party is opposed China. So it's very different. The oath that all Chinese people have sworn to the CCP flag has been etched in their heart and soul. It's fundamental to their beings. Renounce the oath. It's a simple matter on the surface, yet it is profound implication for the life of Chinese people. They experience fundamental changes after they, renounce the, ties with the CCP. Why quit the CCP is not a political movement. The trade-on movement is not political. It's more of a spiritual awakening. Trade-on movement itself does not offer, aim for political power. Instead, trade-on offers Chinese people something much more fundamental and far-reaching: hope and the prospect of freedom and prosperity. The greatest problem facing China today is the decline in moral and moral characters of Chinese society, which the CCP has destroyed. Taidang offers Chinese people opportunity to cleanse their mind of the CCP culture and regrow their righteous and God-trusted moral character. We believe, as we can see, as the development of the Taidang movement, there are, Chinese people are becoming more and more brave, and they dare to shout or hold the banner like "down with the CCP." So it's happening in China almost every day in Chinese society today. We believe that the Taidang movement grows ever larger. The CCP will collapse someday, very soon, I believe, just as what has happened with the former Soviet Union and the Eastern European bloc in 1990s. So let's be ready. The Taidang movement is the best solution to peacefully dissolve the biggest communist party in the world and bring about the peaceful changes to China. It's laying the foundation for fundamental changes in China, a China without communism, the kind of change that can only come from the changes from the Chinese people's heart and soul. The End CCP petition in 2020, amidst the pandemic, the Taidang Center initiated a petition in the U.S. and beyond, calling for an end to the evil Chinese Communist Party. And they'll also have the End CCP car tours around America. We just complete 50 states. We went to Alaska in September, October, and then we just came back from Hawaii. So we just completed the 50 states by car tours to spread our information, like end the evil Chinese Communist Party. We got tremendous support from everywhere we have been in the United States, and also we have gathered more than 4.5 million signatures globally. So let me take this opportunity to call for more support from the international community, from the U.S. government. Because supporting Taidang is not only supporting freedom for Chinese people, but also supporting and protect our own global freedom and security. As is widely acknowledged, the goal of communism is to destroy the world. United we stand. Let us work together until the world's largest communist in China collapsed, until freedom and peace have finally dawned on the eastern horizon and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yirong, for leading this incredible heroic effort. But it still boggles the mind that it's been 20 years, but it's 440 million people have taken this step to quit the Chinese Communist Party. If you're in the live stream, I'm just kind of offering a quick reminder. Next up, I'm going to invite up to the podium Bob Destro. Robert Destro was the Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor in the previous Trump administration. And I might add, he was actually responsible in good part for bringing over the one survivor of forced organ harvesting that we're aware of, a person that I never thought would exist. But through his dedicated efforts, we now have some of, in living form, evidence of the Chinese Communist Party's atrocities. So Bob, if you could please come up to the podium.
Thank you, Jan, for asking me to come today, and I think just listening to our previous speaker talking about, the efforts to get out, and one of the things that I like to tell people, and it's one of the few questions that never gets asked and answered at the State Department. I was actually quite surprised, and that is, what does a good outcome look like? I mean, at the end of the day, we have to be thinking strategically about where we want to be, and then you work backwards from there. And one of the things, as you were quite putting it, about like a peaceful spiritual movement, right? That's how you're going to confront the Communist Party. Having a war with them makes no sense. People think that you can get things that way, but you're just going to kill a lot of people for no good reason. But at the same time, you have to get out of the wishful thinking. I mean, my wife calls it magical thinking, of people who think either you can win with a war, or you can win with just bringing up examples like the genocide in Xinjiang, or what they have done to the Tibetan people and the Tibetan culture. And you almost have to laugh in a way when you know that the Chinese Communist Party says that they get to pick the next Dalai Lama. And you think, you can be really horrified, and, we should be in a way, but it's so stupid that, you just kind of marvel that these people can actually think this way. And so, one of the things I would suggest as we have these conversations is that as those of us who've been privileged to be diplomats are sitting across the table from folks in China, you have to realize that they're God's children just like we are, but at the same time, these are the people who took Mr. Xi's liver. I mean, so you have to be realistic about who you're negotiating with, and they're not going to change that much, because as far as they're concerned, we, all of us, and individually, and the people in China, are commodities, right? We can be moved around like little ships on a map, but I can tell you there's an awful lot of people in the West who think the same way, and they're not Chinese Communist Party members. So it seems to me we just need to be realistic and to understand that what we've got is a form of spiritual warfare. And unless we understand it as such, we're not going to know how to prepare. So anyway, that's what I had to say. Those are my views, and I'm sticking to them.
Thank you, Bob, for that. Next, I'd like to get Larry Liu. Larry Liu is the Deputy Director of Government and Advocacy for the Falun Dafa Information Center. Of course, this is one of the groups that's severely persecuted by the Chinese regime.
Thank you. Thank you, Yang. One of the chapters in the 9 commentaries on Communist Party is about the persecution of Falun Gong. And this is one of the largest, longest running, and most brutal human rights atrocities in modern Chinese history. And the worst part, I would say, in this persecution is the forced organ harvesting that I really thank Assistant Secretary Dashor for bringing the first known survivor of forced organ harvesting, Chen Peiming, to the U.S. And he came out for the first time in August and to speak to the public. And but now I know that he's facing some death threat, and his house just recently was broken into by some CCP agent in New York. And so this persecution has been going on, started in July 1999, has been going on for 25 years, a quarter century this year. And so over the past 25 years, cumulatively, millions of Falun Gong practitioners have been detained, sent to labor camp and prisons. And so far, the documented death cases has surpassed 5,000. But these are only the people we know their name, how they died, their family members send information overseas. So the true number could be many times higher than that. And also, this does not include those people who died anonymously as a victim of forced organ harvesting. And so I just want to mention one thing, because there are so many things to say about this topic. And China has been harvesting organs from death row prisoners since 1980s. It's public secret. But their transplant industry only took off after the persecution of Falun Gong started. And this is admitted by their own doctor. This is one Chinese doctor told Chinese media that the year 2000 was a watershed moment for the organ transplant industry in China. The number of liver transplants in 2000 reached 10 times that of 1999. And the number tripled again in 2005. So what happened in 2000? That was right after the persecution of Falun Gong started. Millions of Falun Gong practitioners sent to labor camp. Some of them are public camps, some are the secret camps. So they suddenly have such abundant supply for organs. So that's how their, transplant industry grows so exponentially. And there's so much other evidence. I won't really have time to go through details. But I just want to mention that the China Tribunal, which is an independent tribunal based in London, and led by Sir Geoffrey Nice, who was the lead prosecutor for Milosevic in 1990s. And they spent a year studying, investigating of all the evidence, and they had multiple hearings, and they have their judgment in 2019, and later on they released their full report in 2020. And so this is one of their conclusions. Forced organ harvesting has been committed for years throughout China on a significant scale, and that Falun Gong practitioners have been one and probably the main source of organ supply. And the concerted persecution and medical testing of Uyghurs is more recent, and it may be the evidence of forced organ harvesting for this group may emerge in a due course. So in 2019, the Legal Council, China Tribunal, also testified before the United Nations Human Rights Council, and the Legal Council estimated that hundreds of thousands of victims of forced organ harvesting. That means hundreds of thousands of people have been killed, and their organs were sold for transplant, for profit, for transplant in China. And many of them go to foreigners, some rich Chinese party officials, and some of them are Americans also. And so in 2020, the United Nations Human Rights Council released a statement jointly signed by 10 their special rapporteurs. These are top experts, human rights experts from UN, and they said they were extremely alarmed by these allegations, and they consider the evidence are credible. And so here I especially want to thank Congressman Chris Smith and also Piero for sponsoring the Stop Forced Organ Harvesting Act, and also Congressman Scott Perry for sponsoring the Falun Gong Protection Act. And both bills have passed the House unanimously and now in Senate, and I just hope that the Senate leadership can allow these two bills to be passed and before the end of the year and make them to be law. And these bills are long overdue. So another question I often get asked by people is why this is something so horrific but not widely known. People on the street not really know much about this. And dozens of media have covered about China Tribunal's funding, but the big one, the New York Times, hasn't. And here's one testimony may give you some glimpse about why. And so former New York Times Beijing correspondent Didi Kirsten-Tatlow submitted a written testimony to China Tribunal. That means it's under oath. Her written testimony to China Tribunal says, I won't be able to read a full 3-page testimony, but I just want to summarize one thing is she had evidence because she had a conversation, had a lunch with some Chinese surgeon in 2016, and she speak fluent Chinese, so she overheard their small talks. So basically, she draw from that conversation that it's common knowledge among Chinese surgeons that forced organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience, it's common knowledge among them, and she overheard their small talk. And also, these Chinese surgeons, they themselves were not even aware that Chinese government announced in 2015, that was 1 year ago, that they announced that they stopped using organs from, prisoners. And and she wanted to pursue the story, but the New York Times editor told her no. And, Chinese government already said they stopped doing that. There's nothing there. It's just unbelievable. The New York Times editor would take what Chinese government said at the face value. And everybody know they're liars, right? And so this is probably the reason why the general public in America hasn't really heard about this. Think about this. The New York Times buried Holocaust in 1940s. They denied the famine in Ukraine in 1930s. Is this a repeating of the history? I'm just questioning this. Another aspect I want to talk about this persecution is transnational repression. And so this persecution is not only in China, but it's here. And so last year, the Justice Department indicted 2 Chinese agents for attempting to bribe a purported IRS official to use the whistleblower program in IRS to strip down the nonprofit status of Shenyun Performing Arts. And the 2 men plead guilty, and both of them were sentenced. And just this week, I learned that the main person was sentenced to 20 months in prison. And so it's hard to believe that, and also in the indictment is clearly these 2 men took order directly from CCP officials in Tianjin. And they went back to China and they took the money and they promised to pay these IRS officials $50,000 to do that and to weaponize our system and to do that. And so hard to believe that they went this length to try to disrupt, a performing arts company that, carry out the best Chinese show, actually. So why CCP is so afraid of a Chinese show? And so this brings up, I just want to give you a little background about Shenyun Performing Arts. So it was founded in 2006 by some artists who practice Falun Gong, and they couldn't really have a stage in China, so they are here with a mission of reviving the 5,000 years of divinely inspired traditional Chinese culture. And so it grew from 1 company to now 8 companies. And every year they tour about 200 cities around the world and perform to about 1 million live audience around the world. And some of you may have seen the show. It's very beautiful. And it has been a bipartisan consensus that China is the largest, the CCP is the largest threat and to the U.S. And so there is a lot of discussion and action about how to counter CCP in terms of military, on the military front, economic front. But I wish there could be more discussion about how to counter CCP on the soft power or even sharp power front. I would argue that the best way to counter CCP's soft power is to use China's own culture to do that. And Shenyun is doing that exactly. And last year, the Washington Post had an article comparing Shenyun to the culture diplomacy programs carried out by the State Department during the Cold War in the 1970s, 80s. And but at that time, the State Department spent millions of dollars for doing that. But Shenyun does not cost any penny from taxpayer. This is completely privately funded. And through Shenyun, the Chinese immigrants saw a different China because Shenyun's tagline is China before communism. And their mission is to revive the culture destroyed by the CCP. And you see, CCP is a foreign ideology. It's not Chinese. It was imported from Soviet Union, and so they destroyed almost most of the traditional Chinese culture during the Cultural Revolution. And so the Night Commentary actually separate the concept of CCP from China very well. But I would say Shenyun make that to another level because it showed China very different from CCP in a very visually compelling way. And because for many Chinese immigrants, they see that, okay, there's another way to be proud of my cultural heritage. I don't have to be a surrogate for CCP's nationalistic agenda. I can be proud of my culture, but I can embrace Western value of democracy, freedom, and human rights. That's what Shenyun shows to the Chinese immigrants. And also, Shenyun, if China can return to its traditional value, which is focused more on harmony, inner peace, instead of the current suppression, aggression, it would be less likely for China to have any conflict with the U.S. So in this way, to some extent, I would argue that what the Shenyun's impact transcends what could be achieved through military deterrence. And Shenyun separates China from CCP. So in this way, it really undermines CCP's legitimacy to represent China, Chinese people, and Chinese culture. So that's why the CCP is so afraid of Shenyun. So they slander Shenyun, they attack Shenyun. So Philadelphia Information Center released a report earlier this year, documented over 130 cases, instances of CCP's harassment, interfere Shenyun. And so that includes they hire agents to try to slash bus tire, and also their embassy, consulates pressure local theaters to cancel the show. And in 2019, the then Chinese ambassador in Spain was caught on tape bragging about how he pressured the Royal Opera of Spain to cancel Shen Yun shows just 2 weeks before the show. You know, a lot of tickets have been already sold. And they succeeded in some other countries like South Korea, like Vietnam, you know, Ecuador, Greece. You know, these countries are vulnerable to CCP's influence. But starting from this year, we saw escalation of that transnational repression. And, in June, there was a meeting, a secret meeting by the Ministry of Public Security in China. And we got a few separate whistleblowers sent that information, the meeting minutes, to us. So we published a report about that meeting. So I just want to be very quick to summarize. The meeting, one of the main agenda of the meeting is to mobilize concealed agents in U.S. to create and escalate the internal conflicts of Falun Gong, to expand nonstop the fighting strength, depth, reach of social media influencers targeting Falun Gong and Shen Yun, and they must attract continuous attention of the entire United States society and force U.S. government to strike on all fronts, eliminating the force of Falun Gong. And a few years ago in 2017, there's another leaked document from Chinese government, and that document say that we should develop non-governmental sources, cultivate non-governmental forces in fighting Falun Gong, and mobilize China-friendly people such as scholars, experts, journalists, and overseas Chinese community leaders who have greater influence in U.S. and Western country to speak for us and strive to make more foreign media to publish more reports favorable to us, to CCP. And another leaked document just this year, a few months ago, very recently, another leaked document indicate that China's Ministry of Public Security and also the Ministry of State Security, they has an interministerial joint office for combating Falun Gong in North America. That's the name of the office, 北美打法办, combating Falun Gong in North America. And this office has been elevated from the section level to deputy bureau level, 副局级, to deputy bureau level. And Wu Xiuhua was appointed the director of this office for combating Falun Gong in North America in 2021. So this is a new development. So I just want to kind of mention this. If you saw some social media posts or even mainstream media article attacking Shen Yun or attacking Falun Gong, I encourage you to approach it with caution and skepticism, because you don't really know who is behind this. And so I encourage you to go to Shen Yun website or Falun Dafa Information Center website to get a full picture and the true story. And you probably heard about just 2 months ago, Linda Sun, who was the former chief of staff New York governor, who was indicted for being an agent of China. And the CCP's long arm is here, and its reach is much deeper and wider than most people think. So last topic, I just want to quickly mention that Falun Gong's response to this persecution in China. Throughout Chinese history, whenever there was a conflict between the people and the government, there usually are two outcomes. One is passive submission, the other is violent rebellion. But Falun Gong practitioners took neither approach. Instead, in response to the persecution, they launched the largest civil disobedience grassroots movement and information freedom campaign in modern Chinese history. So according to Minhui.org, a Falun Gong website, that there are currently estimated about 200,000 underground print shops run by Falun Gong practitioners. These are family-run print shops underground, and they print DVDs, booklets, including the 9 commentaries and pamphlets, and they pass out to their community, to fellow Chinese, often at a great personal risk. A 2017 Freedom House report titled "The Battle for China's Spirit," and this is really a great report. I recommend this report for anybody who wants to know about religious freedom in China. In this report, there is a chapter about Falun Gong, and this Freedom report said that, this Freedom House report noted that disseminating 9 commentaries and encouraging Chinese people to quit the party has become a focus of outreach efforts by Falun Gong practitioners in China. And the report said that the CCP has created a self-fulfilling prophecy, generating the very threats they feared by turning tens of millions of apolitical citizens and party members into an army of dedicated activists at odds with the CCP. And so the Freedom House report also noted that many Falun Gong practitioners have been arrested and sentenced to prisons for spreading the nine commentaries. And so they examined many court documents of those sentencings. And many of the court documents said, these Falun Gong practitioners, exactly because of their possessed many nine commentaries, often, each person have like hundreds of nine commentary booklets or DVDs, and they were sentenced to prisons. And so these, they really sacrificed a lot. And a lot of them died in prison in labor camp, and some of them survived. And a few of us are with us here today. I would like to invite them to come to the front. I just want to briefly mention their name. And I want to mention that Chunrong Wang, and if you can come to the front, and she was an accounting firm owner in China, and she was sentenced to 3.5 years in labor camp. And Chunying Wang, and she was a nurse in China. She sentenced to 5 years in labor camp. And Mike Yu, and he was an accountant in China. He was sentenced to 2 years in labor camp. Just come to the front.
Yeah, you can just come up in the middle. That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Chunrong Wang. And Tom Tang, Zhiheng Tang, he was an entrepreneur in China, and he was sentenced to 4 years. And also Shenhua Wang, and she was a Russian translator interpreter, and she was sentenced to 2 years in labor camp. So I just want to mention, these are people who are fortunate to be able to come to U.S. Some of them are, they're really grateful to U.S. government for accepting them. Some of them came here as a refugee, and but their sacrifice will not be forgotten. And the new Free China will forever remember their sacrifice and be thankful for their contribution. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. So before I invite Nuri Turkel up, we've had a few messages that were actually sent to us by congressional members and one by video. So we're going to run Congressman Ralph Norman's video statement now.
Hi, I'm Congressman Ralph Norman from South Carolina. The Epoch Times publication, The 9 Commentaries on the Communist Party, which was published some 20 years ago today, is an extraordinary work highlighting the destruction of the Chinese Communist Party. The CCP has persecuted millions of Falun Gong practitioners, which I know is such an important practice for the Chinese culture. It is so encouraging that now nearly 440 million Chinese people have come to the light and have quit the CCP. I believe this is largely in part due to the Epoch Times and especially its 9 commentaries on the Communist Party. I wish I could be at your forum in person to join you in continuing to raise the awareness about the evils of the CCP, but just know that I stand with you and will always support you in fight. Thank you so much. God bless you.
So now I'll invite Nuri Turkel to the podium. So he is the former chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, USCIRF. He's a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute. But perhaps most importantly, he was actually born in a Chinese re-education camp. Nuri, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me at this important event, Jan. I appreciate your hard work, diligence, educating the world about the evil nature of the CCP. I have the pleasure of working with you and your team over the years. I'm very grateful. Thank you. I'm also happy to see my old friend Bob here and Piro. Thank you all for joining. I also wanted to take this opportunity to thank the Epoch Times for shining a spotlight on human rights abuses committed against vulnerable ethno-religious groups in China, including the Uyghurs over the year. Before the established media started covering, Epoch Times started this educational endeavors. It's been ongoing, and I'm so pleased to be here with you, show my solidarity. During my time at USERF, advocating for Falun Gong community was one of my focus areas. We're here to celebrate, as been discussed, something very significant, truly remarkable, that over 400 million people left or decided to quit CCP. This is not just a number. Oftentimes people look at the number, they forget about the consequences of making such a significant decision to stand up for freedom and justice in the face of retaliation from this Leninist dictatorship in Beijing. Leaving Communist Party can be very risky, could cause people's lives, end up including imprisonment. CCP surveillance, as previous speaker mentioned, leaves very little room for privacy, making it very difficult for people to have a healthy conversation and make a conscious decision, because repercussions are very serious. As Jan noted, not only I was born in a re-education camp, while being in the United States as a citizen, a former government official, I still face retaliation by Beijing, including to hold my aging, ailing mother away from her American family for more than 20 years. The bravery that we have seen in the Chinese communities leaving this evil regime, evil ideology, is extraordinary. And someone might wonder why people making such a serious decision. As you have been reading and are well aware, CCP has faced, rightfully so, a harsh criticism led by the United States government. That's all and relied on the reports done by various NGOs, investigative journalists, government agencies, exposing some of the most heinous crimes committed against the ethno-religious groups, including the Uyghur people in what Chinese government calls Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. The treatment of the Uyghur people, as Assistant Secretary Destro mentioned earlier, is a glaring example of what this regime is capable of. A couple of years ago, I was in Taiwan delivering a speech on religious freedom in China. One of the messages that I want the Taiwanese people to hear from me directly was just looking at the way that the Uyghur people treated demonstrates what this regime is capable of, committing modern-day genocide, locking up millions of people in concentration camps, subjecting them to collective punishment that the world has not seen since the Holocaust era. It's no surprise, as you know, that two successive administrations, the Trump administration and the Biden administration, recognized the crimes committed against the Uyghur people as genocide and crimes against humanity. And in this note, at this juncture, I wanted to thank Assistant Secretary Destro for his leadership in late 2020 and early 2021, for his support in internal advocacy for then Secretary Pompeo to call it what it is, crimes against humanity and genocide. Thank you, Bob. And this is the repression against ethno-religious groups, not only confined to the Falun Gong communities, Tibetan communities, and Uyghur communities, as you have been seeing in the last couple of days. They're also attacking the Hong Kong pro-democracy activists, including over 90 years old Cardinal Zenz. And also Jimmy Lai. Jimmy Lai's story has been told in many places, but something that is so remarkable is that this man's willingness to stand up. He's a British citizen. He was not short of money. He could have enjoyed his life in the south of France or somewhere beautiful, but he decided to speak up and stand up against this brutal regime. This leaves us, these courageous actions leaves us with one important question, which is what kind of system on fear and repression and suffering of its own people will choose to adhere to. The Chinese CCP believes that the CCP-ruled system is what the Chinese people wanted to have in their daily lives. And many of the American audience, when they look at China, don't understand something very important, which is the CCP decides everything, every aspect of policies and the decisions for its citizens. That includes personnel, including leadership appointments, foreign policy, national defense, social issues, economic issues, even education. And as you know, the CCP demands loyalty. Once you decided to speak up or stand up, you will be subject to ill treatment or punishment, or collective punishment in the case of the Uyghurs. I'd like to end with a story that former Secretary of State Pompeo profiled in his book that involves a decision that he made closing the Chinese consulate in Houston. So when the ambassador of China to Washington demarched, the Secretary Pompeo had to meet with them. So the expectation was, why you're closing the consulate in Houston? But the question was focusing on one statement that Secretary Pompeo made at the time, that the CCP does not represent the people of China. That speaks volume of how much this government is sensitive, and they know exactly what they're doing. So we have an uphill battle. We have a monumental task ahead of us. The CCP is not only harming their own citizens, but now trying to export that model, governance around the world, normalizing collective punishment, religious persecution around the world through economic coercion and diplomatic pressure. Thank you again for allowing me to be here.
Thank you, Nuri. So next we'll ask up to the podium retired Colonel John Mills. He's actually the former Director of Cybersecurity Policy at the Office of the Secretary of Defense, now Senior Fellow at the Center for Security Policy. John.
Yeah, thank you, Jan. It's an honor to be here with you and everyone. So what I wanted to talk about real briefly was the malign activities of the CCP around the world, and we are in a very dangerous period. They're exporting their malign activities far outside the reaches of just China itself, but around the world, and we're a world on fire. I would actually assert we're already a world at war. And if it was 1939, it's not November of 2024, it's November of 1939, but if you ask right before the war of experts in 1939, people say, well, there's not a world war going on, but there's a conflict in China, there's a conflict in Ethiopia, there's a conflict in Spain, but there's not a world war. Well, September changed everything, okay? We're going through that right now. Everything that is going on in the world traces directly to the malign activities of the Chinese Communist Party. Everything, every part of the conflict. And I'll just give you a few examples here. Right here in the United States, the fentanyl crisis, 10,000 dead a month. We're going on to the third year of losing 120,000 a year. That's more in 1 year than the entire Korean War, the entire Vietnam War, and the entire war on terror combined in 1 year. We're stepping over bodies on the streets in America from fentanyl. It's 100% from China, now made under the supervision of Chinese MSS personnel, PLA personnel in northern Mexico. I mean, if that's not war, I frankly don't know what is. I mean, and we have to recognize it as that. And from my training experience and background, when you can walk, when somebody can walk between the warring factions of the drug cartels in northern Mexico and nobody touches them, that means they're the ones running the situation. And that's exactly what's going on with Chinese paramilitary personnel in northern Mexico. That's exactly what's going on. So they are calling shots. Now, the DOJ has been pursuing, and there have been indictments against companies and individuals, including for Chinese nationals, for conducting the supervision and oversight of the fentanyl in northern Mexico. But we have to get a lot more assertive. This is absolutely China declaring war. There's also the mass psychosis of TikTok. That is digital fentanyl, no question about it. That is targeted mass psychosis using their vast capabilities in cyber and data and AI to custom a message stream right back, because they've created a digital twin of everyone. I guarantee you, everyone in this room has a digital twin in the servers in Shenzhen, China. I guarantee it. The Chinese colonies of Russia, okay, I did say colony. That's what's going on right now. The Chinese colonies of Russia, North Korea, Iran, and Venezuela are waging regional war. Russia would be out of the Ukraine conflict. They would have been out of the Ukraine conflict 2 years ago if it wasn't for the support of the Chinese Communist Party. Nobody makes the war material that is compatible with the Russian war machine. Nobody. And part of it is China has been very coy on this, saying, well, but that's actually made in Iran or that's made in North Korea. Part of that might be true, but that's all made with Chinese tooling and machinery that's been exported. So this is all China. This is all China. NATO finally realized this in summer of this year and really came after China strong. But this has been going on for 2 years. Russia, this whole war in Ukraine would have been over if it wasn't for Chinese war support. So I count 14 major conflicts and hotspots going on around the world. Everything traces directly to China. And, oh yeah, by the way, we do have, it's not well known in U.S. law, 15, I'll cite just one of the citations, 15 CFR 791.4. China is listed as an adversary state. That's pretty strong language. China is listed as an adversary state. We need to start acting like it. It's in U.S. law. But we have a lot of failures that we got to work on with the incoming administration. A lot of failures, and I come out of a long career in the national security world, both as a military and as a civilian. We have a lot of failures. We have to understand China as a pervasive, malign, and mortal threat and start acting like that. Our nuclear count of China is way off, way off. And I've worked behind the veil for a number of years on national intelligence estimates and intel community assessments. I am very dissatisfied, and using an intel term, I have very low confidence in our count of the Chinese nuclear count. We are being lazy on our count. Possible nukes in space, possible missiles in Cuba. The Chinese footprint in Cuba is growing and pervasive. And they, by doctrine and design on all their forward encampments in other countries around the world, they put long-range missiles, including the S-300, S-400, which is dual use. And you can reach out and not just hit air targets, you can hit ground targets. We have a missile crisis going on in Cuba, very likely. We have just a weak national security response all over both domestically and overseas. It's just a total failure, and I was able to sit in on the Office of Director of National Intelligence, their briefings to the press on foreign influence in the U.S. elections, and I think they missed a lot of data points. I was very disappointed with the ODNI briefings. They missed a lot of obvious data points right in front of their face, and they just totally failed to recognize China's role in trying to influence the U.S. election, if nothing else through the proxies of Iran, because they would say, oh, no, well, we're not saying anything from China, but we're seeing from Iran. Iran would not exist today if it wasn't for the CCP and the financial funding of the CCP. That whole regime would be gone in Iran. So this is ridiculous. They say, yeah, we're seeing Iran. Well, if you're seeing Iran, you're seeing China. That's what's going on. And all these cyber assaults, Volt Typhoon, Flax Typhoon, Salt Typhoon. A lot of these, we're getting all these weird messages on our cell phones. That's the CCP. That's the CCP. It's a massive cyber onslaught is going on right now. They're pervasive fox hunting against American citizens of Chinese heritage. This is crazy. We're allowing this on U.S. soil? This is insanity. We have to become far more aggressive on this and really shut this down. We cannot allow a foreign threat actor, which is an adversary nation, China, the CCP. We cannot allow this. We need to totally shut this down. And it's our own law enforcement and intelligence have really missed what's going on here, and they've misused it. And also American citizens like Michael McMahon out of New York has been caught up in this. This whole fox hunt thing has been prosecuted for it for flimsy reasons. It's very, very shameful. So we have to become, with the new administration, we have to become far more aggressive in shutting down the Chinese Communist operations domestically and overseas, because we are a world on fire, we are a world on war. Everything is tracing to the malign activities of the Chinese Communist Party.
Before we continue, I'm going to read a couple of statements from congressional members. So we have a statement from Congressman Gus Bilirakis. China has a long history using a variety of repressive methods as a part of a genocidal campaign to forcibly remove the people and culture of certain religious and ethnic minorities within China. While this heinous practice has been used against a variety of ethnic and religious groups, like the Uyghurs, Tibetans, Muslims, and Christians, Falun Gong practitioners in particular have been the target of the CCP. Falun Gong is a traditional spiritual discipline founded in 1992 and only 4 years later started facing oppression from the state, which has only increased in intensity. Falun Gong practitioners suffer from persecution, intimidation, imprisonment, torture, and even death at the hands of the CCP, solely because of adherence to their personal beliefs. They are the main source of organs illegally harvested by the Chinese government and are particularly targeted for other brutal treatment and torture while being held in Chinese prisons, concentration camps, and detention facilities. The United States and our allies must send a strong and unwavering message in defense of basic human rights and protections for all people. The right to worship and freedom of belief must be protected throughout the globe. No person should ever be intimidated, forced from their ancestral homeland, imprisoned, or murdered because of their beliefs. That's the statement from Congressman Gus Bilirakis. I'm going to read a statement from Congressman Dan Newhouse. It is no secret that the Chinese Communist Party is working around the clock to influence our institutions and change our way of life here in the United States and around the world. Religious freedom, freedom of speech, and basic human rights are the cornerstones of liberty, and I remain committed to reining in the CCP's malicious efforts to degrade them. I thank you for your efforts, for bringing these issues to Congress and making known how important they should be to proponents of freedom and liberty. And that's Congressman Dan Newhouse. Next up here, from up here, I'm going to invite Shi Van Fleet. Shi Van Fleet is an author and also a survivor of Mao's Cultural Revolution. Shi.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me to this important meeting. And so for those who don't know me, this is a little background story. I was just a quiet, typical Asian American, just stay quiet, mind my own business until 2020. And so when I saw what happening on the street, just remind me of what I experienced as a young girl during the Cultural Revolution. So in 2021, I went to a Loudon School school board meeting and just gave a 1-minute speech and comparing what they're teaching in school to what I experienced in the Cultural Revolution. And it went viral to my surprise. And people started to invite me for interviews and for speeches. And during that time, I got so much support from Epoch Times. Young interviewed me twice, and a lot of articles about my story. So what surprised me is that Americans know very little about communism, about Chinese communism, and about Chinese Cultural Revolution. And that's a big problem. And so since then, I start to make this my mission to educate American people. Just like Mr. Liu said, the mainstream media, they're not helping. They're not educating the American public. The schools, they're not helping. They're not teaching the children of the danger of communism. And in fact, last year, the Senate of Virginia defeated a bill that required teaching the evil of communism in school. Why? They said, it's racism. They say that if you teach communism in school, and then you're going to affect the Asians because they are the victims. Most of them are the victims of the communism. That's exactly why we need to teach communism, the danger of communism in America, the history of it. So I think that is something that we really, really have to work hard. And Epoch Times has been doing a great job, but we are not reaching the young people. And because we don't have really control of the academia, and we don't have control of public educational system. While we don't do anything, the CCP has been working really hard to gain the mind and soul of American youth. They have Confucian institution, hundreds of them in higher education. Now some of them are shut down, but they just change names. And now they're reaching to the public schools with so-called Chinese language programs and sister exchange programs. I think early this year, a bunch of high school kids I think it's Idaho, wrote a love letter to Xi Jinping and called him Grandpa Xi. And then she actually replied and then invited them, everything paid for, a trip to China. To do what? To do brainwash. So that is what we are facing. While we are not reaching to the young people, the CCP are doing it. And now we know what the former, thank God, the former candidate, presidential candidate for vice president, Tim Watts, for 20-some years have been taking Chinese American students to China, paid for again by the CCP to do what? To learn the wonderful things about socialism. And that is really appalling. So I really think that we have to make this a priority. And so we have all this history month. We have Black History Month, we have whatever month, we have LGBTQ year, not month. But we don't have something like anti-communist month. We have one day, which is November 6th. And I have been really asking for help. And I did talk to the victim of Communism Foundation, and I want to maybe get help from Heritage Foundation, maybe from Epoch Times. Let's make November the month of anti-communism. Let's teach the American people, and especially American youth, about the danger of communism and the evil of communism. And I think that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Xi. So next, I'm going to invite over to my left Dean Baxendale to speak. Dean is the publisher of Optimum Publishing, fellow Canadian, and he has actually published quite a few books that I think are really important. I'm going to name them. Willful Blindness, now with a new update. Hidden Hand, The Mosaic Effect, China Freedom Trap, and The China Nexus. Any of these books are incredibly valuable in helping understand, the true nature of the CCP. So, Dean, I'll leave it to you.
Jan, thank you. It's great to be here with my friends, fellow brothers and sisters in a quest for freedom and democracy, and to highlight the evils of the Chinese Communist Party. So, a couple things. My journey is, being quite incredible over the last few years, where I found a great many friends here in Washington, where recognizing that there are evils taking place, whereby the economic subversion, the Chinese Communist Party's hybrid warfare operations globally, and how they have affected nations, our democracies, and in every attempt to undermine our way of life, our freedom of religion, our freedom of belief, our freedom of speech. These are all things that we hold sacred. Our freedom of assembly. There is no freedom of assembly in China, yet there are people, there are movements in China where the people are starting to rise and starting to make their voice heard. We need to understand, and they need to know, that the spirit in this room is here to support all of them in their quest to be free from tyranny. Let's make no mistake about it. Communism, the Chinese Communist Party, actually they give communism a really bad name because they're not a communist regime. China Inc., the largest global transnational organized crime operation globally, working with the Crinks Alliance, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and now Venezuela. They're here to forward their agenda and to crush our democracy. You talked about fentanyl. The fentanyl problem is significant, and also in Canada, and our operations in Canada supporting the money laundering operations for the Sinaloa cartel, along with a few other Colombian cartels. Canada's punching well above our weight, unfortunately in a very negative way. And ultimately, it has become a transshipment point for fentanyl and the precursors. We are manufacturing millions upon millions of pills each month out of Vancouver, along with the Mexicans, to invade and ultimately kill Americans, kill Canadians. But Vancouver is a transnational shipment point. The United States is now surrounded. Antigua, Barbados, Jamaica. The amount of money that is being put into those jurisdictions actually they haven't had to spend too much money in terms of bribing their officials, getting them on board. So now we have ports, we have Chinese Communist Party investment that ultimately is buying the government and ultimately creating opportunities to launch cyber operations against the U.S. and critical infrastructure throughout the world. But in a cyber war, milliseconds make a difference. I'm currently working on a book and an investigation in Prince Edward Island, of all places, whereby the Chinese Communist Party, using a Buddhist monastic group, has been involved with laundering money and setting up a forward operating base for who knows what. We're getting closer to the end of that investigation, and that will come out in a book in 2025. But we're here together for, and I have to applaud the work of the CCC and Piero, Congressman Chris Smith, for the leadership, really the phenomenal leadership in bringing forward the stories of the Falun Dafa, Falun Gong, of Taiwan, of the oppression of Rushan Abbas' sister, allowing people to bring the stories forward so that people in America and around the world can better understand what this tyranny is all about and what they represent. Make no mistake about it. When we look across the table in a diplomatic way with a Chinese official, the first thing we have to ask, are they lying to us yet again? And we have seen this regime constantly, we're not oppressing, we're not organ harvesting, we're not doing anything in Xinjiang. No, there's no genocide. There's no cultural genocide. Look at Tibet. It started 70 years ago. That is the prime example of how the Chinese Communist Party started rolling out their campaign to oppress all those in China and ostensibly to overrun their societies, to cancel them, and they are trying to cancel those here in America and in Canada and in all democracies because they do not want the opposition. People like me are targeted. The MSS wanted to understand why my author, are we associated with the 5 poisons? I'll put up my hand. I'm associated with the 5 poisons. I love all my friends and my colleagues because they represent what humanity is, what dignity is, and what human rights should be all about. People should have the opportunity to be who they want to be, live free, and have the opportunity to have a great way of life. That is what America offers. That is what democracies offer. And together, we must fight for all of the people inside China. All of the oppressed peoples around the world, because there are many other countries as well, because China has been able to export their totalitarian operations globally. We must stay united. We must be part of the united front for freedom and democracy. Working together, our souls are all bound together. Let's fight the Chinese Communist Party. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. So I saw John Lenchowski come in. It's kind of hard to miss him. John, when I spoke with him about the Tuidang movement, about the Quit the CCP movement, he's the only person who instantly understood exactly its value and frankly, a lot deeper than I did. So I'm going to invite John to come up to the podium and say a few words here. Thank you for making the time. John is the founder, president emeritus, and chancellor of the Institute of World Politics. It's a premier school of diplomacy here in Washington, D.C., and he was also the principal Soviet affairs advisor to President Reagan. Kind of relevant here.
Thank you, Jan, and thank you everybody for being here. I think this is a wonderful event, and this is the kind of event that is an expression of solidarity with the people who are suffering under communist tyranny. Under communist rule, the party has a psychological strategy. It's a strategy to keep the people in a state of fatalistic acceptance of their lot as subjects of party tyranny. They want people to either accept, they first of all want people to accept the legitimacy of the regime, which is their weak attempt through the use of Marxism, Leninism with Chinese characteristics to come up with some kind of moral, practical reason why they deserve to be in power when they're completely illegitimate. But they want people to be in a state of futile resignation, where there is enough hopelessness and despair that people will feel as though resistance is impossible. And part of what the way they do this is to atomize the society by creating an atmosphere of fear and mistrust, where there are so many informants to the secret police, and nobody knows who is an informant. And people are co-opted into that position against their will, but they're forced into it. They're tested if they don't inform when certain quote-unquote crimes are committed before their eyes. And if they don't inform, they can be punished for not informing. So people are forced into this type of a position, and nobody knows who is an informant. We don't know how many informants there are in China, but we know in East Germany a full 25% of the population were informants to the secret police, and that could be even a low estimate. So what you have is people living in fear and mistrust, and that produces the atomization of society, where people are separated from one another because of that mistrust. And therefore, once atomized, they're all alone against the party state. They cannot organize into cells of resistance. And so a huge part, and so when you feel all alone, you get increasingly hopeless and in a state of despair and futile resignation. This is exactly where the party wants them to be. And they control the semantics, they control their speech, they control their thoughts, and all of that speech control and thought control is a method of ultimately ensuring behavior control. It is done by maintaining a monopoly of communications and information combined with the ideological party line. We are in a Cold War with China, whether our current administration realizes it or not. And in any kind of a war, Clausewitz recommends that one goes after the adversary's center of gravity. The center of gravity is that without which you cannot conduct war. It is that without which your regime may not even be able to survive. And the center of gravity in communist China is the internal security system, and its nucleus is that combination of a monopoly of information and communication and the ideological party line. What we can do to help the courageous people who are trying to resist the party and who are leaving the party or declaring that they will never join it, is we must communicate with them. We must connect with them. We must make them feel as though they're not alone, that there are those of us here, elsewhere in the world, who stand with them in solidarity. We have to bear witness to the human rights violations that they're suffering. They have to know that there are people who sympathize with them, who stand in solidarity with them. And then, if we can communicate with them, especially through broadcasting, through the breaking down the Great Firewall, and through internet communications and so on, we can encourage, and we've got to figure out many ways of getting them to be able to communicate with each other. During the Cold War, Alexander Solzhenitsyn called our Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, and Radio Liberty the most powerful weapons we had in the Cold War, and it was precisely because we not only gave them the truth, we gave them their history back, we gave them alternative ideas, we gave them religion which was denied to them. And by the way, there was nothing contrary to our Constitution to broadcast religious programs in different faiths. And so there's plenty of precedent for this kind of thing. And but it was the instantaneity of information which was also a key element. So because what happens when there is I don't want to talk for too long. You can give me the hook anytime you want.
I think this is valuable, John.
Keep
yeah,
going.
you can
Okay.
finish.
Yeah.
And don't forget to tell us why you don't have to believe in communism for it to be communism.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I will. Let me get to that. Okay.
Okay.
I just wanted to say, when there is a civil disturbance in a totalitarian country, what's the first thing the regime does? It cuts off all communications to the locality of the disturbance, and only then does it go and crush the disturbance. Why does it do it in that order? Because if people learn that there was a disturbance, if it eventually gets out, and in a totalitarian country it may take weeks or months for it to get out, then the news also is that it was crushed. And so the people then get back into their funk of futile resignation. When the people are able to communicate with each other, and when we are able to get a signal, for example, a broadcast signal, into a denied area where there's no free press, for example. This is what happened, for example, in Poland, when the strikers went on strike at the Lenin shipyard in Gdansk, and they developed underground lines of communication to the Voice of America and Radio Free Europe. And when the strike happened, they managed to get the fact of the strike to our broadcasters, to the VOA and to Radio Free Europe. And then they, in turn, broadcast it to millions of Poles who learned about the strike while it was still happening and could rise up in solidarity and join the solidarity movement the way people can join the Tweedong movement. And so, within a matter of weeks, millions of people joined the solidarity movement, and it was the beginning of the end of the Soviet Empire. It was the instantaneity of this information that the regime particularly feared. Not only the truth, but the instantaneity of that truth. And it was a way by which the dissidents could communicate with the rest of the people of their country. There are, I've been told, something like 180,000 civil disturbances every year in China, and I bet you most of them don't know about the existence of the other ones, certainly not in a timely fashion. If there were better communication amongst the people, that could become a tsunami against the party. Jan asked me to talk about the ideology. Just very briefly, many people in this country believe that the former Soviet Union in its latter years ceased to be communist, and that China long ago ceased to be communist. And it was on the basis of an idea that you have to believe in an ideology for it to be politically operational. The fact is that in a communist system, you don't have to believe in it. And many party members don't have to believe in it. But the ideology is there for two fundamental purposes. One is to establish political conformity throughout the society, establish a standard by which journalists should do their reporting, establish a standard by which party discipline is maintained within the party. And by the way, all of the corruption that exists in China could either be an effort to do an ideological purification campaign, which is what Gorbachev attempted to do in the Soviet Union in the latter years, or it could be Xi trying to eliminate rivals under the guise of anti-corruption. But whatever the case, the point of maintaining the ideology there and how it is operational is that people it is part of a key element of the internal security system of the party state. It is the drum beating for soldiers marching. And everybody has to march according to the drum beat in order to maintain conformity, in order to go along with the regime. And if anybody is a nonconformist, they can be identified by the sergeant as a voluntarist, as an opportunist. There are all sorts of ideological expressions for this sort of thing, and they can be then disciplined or punished for being a dissident. So you don't have to believe in the ideology. This is mirror imaging. It's one of the treacherous methodologies of Western foreign policy and intelligence analysis. Other people and other systems are not just like us, and China is a communist country, and it uses the ideology in order to maintain control over the population and discipline within the party. Thank you.
John, thank you so much. Okay. Now we're going to invite Reggie Littlejohn, founder and president of Women's Rights Without Frontiers.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, and I have been asked to speak about coercive population control in China. I am an attorney, and I represented Chinese refugees in their cases for political asylum in the mid-90s. One of my a client was forcibly sterilized. She had had 2 children, so she had violated the one-child policy, and they literally lifted her up and dragged her out of her home, screaming and crying, and held her down to a table and performed a tubal ligation without anesthesia, and she was permanently disabled after that. And that's when, in the mid-90s, I understood that the Chinese Communist Party's propaganda that the one-child policy was voluntary was a complete lie. I left the practice of law, founded Women's Rights Without Frontiers, and have been one of the leading voices in the world to sound the alarm about forced abortion in China. So, as you may know, the Chinese Communist Party has moved from a one-child policy to a 2-child policy to a 3-child policy. Right now, the policy is every married couple is allowed to have 3 children, which means that unmarried women are still technically, subject to forced abortion as well as 4th children. Why are they doing this when they need desperately more children? They are actually pressuring people who are able to have more kids. I believe that they are probably selectively enforcing the one-child policy against disfavored minorities such as the Tibetans and the Uyghurs. And I call upon them immediately to cease all coercive population control. Now, John Lankowski has just been talking about the atomization of society. There's nothing that has been more atomizing in Chinese society than the one-child policy, because it touches every single person in China. And at the height of the policy, everyone basically was an informant, or almost, they tried to make everybody to be an informant on everybody else. So if a woman was illegally pregnant, so she was pregnant without a birth permit, she could be informed on by her family, her friends, her neighbors, her coworkers, people in the village that were hired to just look at women's abdomens. And if a woman walked by who appeared to be pregnant and was not carrying a birth permit on her at that time, she could be subject to forced abortion. And so this is a way of absolutely atomizing society. You don't know who you can trust, so you can't organize for democracy. And, you know, there was a time I've heard testimony. There was a woman who testified with me in Congress. And by the way, I'd like to acknowledge Pierre Tosi and Congressman Chris Smith, who have been second to none in terms of bringing many, many hearings on this issue to the United States Congress. And I've testified, I believe, at 8 of them. But, you know, there was a woman who testified with me who was forcibly aborted 7 times, and she was in her factory, and her working group had to inform on each other, because if anybody gave birth illegally from that working group in her factory, they would all be severely punished. And that's how they punished people. They also had, you know, family planning police in the factories to make sure that women were not pregnant. I'll leave it to your imagination how they did that. So in 2009 at the Copenhagen Climate Summit, one of the heads of the National Family Planning Commission bragged, she boasted that the CCP's gift to the world, or their contribution to the attempt to control climate change, was preventing 400 million lives through the one-child policy. 400 million! That's more than the entire population of the United States and Canada combined. And these were prevented through forced abortion, forced sterilization, and even infanticide. And at my very first time I testified at a Chris Smith hearing, I brought to the hearing a document that I called Best Practices Infanticide, and it was a conversation online on the official OBGYN website of how best to make sure that a late-term baby that was being born would be dead before it went through the birth canal. It was a very, very chilling document, which has since, of course, been removed from the internet. So I also want to just make the connection between when I saw the COVID passports, the vaccine passports coming to the United States and to the world in the response to COVID, that's when I saw Chinese-style tyranny and totalitarianism coming to the world through the World Health Organization, through the response to COVID. And, you know, having observed and actually sort of been in a struggle against the Chinese Communist totalitarian machine, I was immediately able to recognize that these vaccine passports, which are now called digital health IDs, have the same platform as the China social credit system, by which it's a tool of mass surveillance and totalitarian control. They just surveil everything about a person. They have real-time geolocation, facial recognition. They know where you work, who you are, what you look like, your internet search history, your internet spending history, your criminal history, your medical history. And they come up with a picture of you about how compliant you are as a Chinese communist sheep. And if you are very compliant, you can live what looks like a normal life. But if you're not compliant, then they will punish you. And the punishments can be you can't get you lose your job. You can't borrow money, so you can't buy a house or start a business. Your kid won't go to a good school. You won't be able to travel, including on the bus, not just on the plane. If you keep it up, they will sever you from your bank account and your credit cards. And you think that could not happen in North America? That already did happen with the Canadian truckers when they had a vaccine rally. They cut them off from their credit cards and their bank accounts. And if you keep it up in China, they will just disappear you. And all of that technology exists in the United States. In fact, I think they got a lot of it from the United States and the world. And the World Health Organization is pushing these vaccine passports, which they are calling digital health IDs, all over the world right now as we speak, and I want to just alert people that this is a wave of installing Chinese communist totalitarianism, a police surveillance state worldwide. So this is something that we must resist. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're running a little bit late on time. I'm going to read a statement. Eric Patterson from the Victims of Communism unfortunately couldn't be here, but they provided us with a statement. I'm going to read it, and then we'll get to our final speakers. This is the VOC statement. Every November, the free world recognizes Victims of Communism Day, remembering the dreadful consequences that followed the Bolshevik takeover of Russia on November 17, 1917. Communism's grisly crimes are vast and well documented, and there is no single country with more victims of communism, past and present, than Communist China. Today we focus our commemoration and our hopes on the bravery of those who expose the falsehoods and brutality of communism in China, and in particular, those who have publicly renounced the Chinese Communist Party, CCP. The Tuidang movement is inspired by the truth-telling of the 9 commentaries on the Communist Party, published by the Epoch Times. Those powerful essays detail the evil of communism in China. We at the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation have tried to do our part in exposing such crimes, including recent reports of the China's onslaught against the Uyghurs, which the U.S. government has determined to be a genocide, the complicity of Western companies in the CCP's brutal system of Uyghur forced labor, as well as Beijing's horrific forced organ harvesting targeting Falun Gong practitioners. The commentaries call for the Chinese people to purge the poison of communism, quote, from their spirits, extract their minds from its evil content, and free themselves from the shackles of terror. Millions of individual men and women have done so. We salute their courage to no longer live by lies. They set an example for all of us to take a moral stand for truth, reality, justice, and freedom. The day will come when their conviction of a free China will come to pass, when the CCP is relegated to the ash bin of history. That's the statement by VOC. Next, we will invite Faith McDonald to speak. She's the Director of Advocacy. And I'm going to get you to I never am able to pronounce the name of your organization properly, so I'm going to get you to do it, please.
It's Greek, it's not Chinese, so Katartismos.
The Katartismos Global. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here with you all. I'm so happy about being able to celebrate 440 million people who have left the Communist Party. And I'm so grateful to the Epoch Times for what it has done to spread truth and freedom, not only in China and not only for the Chinese people and those who are victims of the Chinese Communist Party, but in this country. You have been a lifesaver in this nation, so I thank you for that. I brought my copy of the 9 commentaries that I've had for quite a few years now and have learned so much from. I also have with me another book. Many years ago, when I was a little girl, I grew up in a church denomination called the Salvation Army. And the Salvation Army was in China, starting in the early 1900s. And I didn't know much about the oppression and persecution of the Chinese people that was going on when I was little. I couldn't have imagined the horrific things that the CP does to all kinds of ethnic groups, and the idea of forced organ harvesting. You have to be demonically inspired to even come up with that, never mind to think about it. So I didn't know about that, but I did know that the Salvation Army in China had to go underground. So this colonel in the Salvation Army, Che Keng-yi, wrote this book many years later about the history of the Salvation Army in China. So back when I was a child, I knew about that, but it wasn't until later, working in religious freedom, which I've been doing for about 35 years, that I began to discover all the horrors, but also the courage and the strength of all of the people of faith and the different ethnicities in China who suffer under the CCP. And just a few quick examples of what I learned. Working first at the Institute on Religion and Democracy as the International Religious Liberty Director, I received by email this brave statement in 1998 called the United Appeal of the Various Schools of the Chinese House Church. I got this December 7, 1998. And the Chinese House Church has called on the government to admit to God's great power and seriously study the new trends of development of Christianity in this generation. The government, that's the CCP, should realize if it were not for the work of God, why would so many churches and Christians be raised up in China? So that's just one example of what I learned as I was working. Also, in 2002, Larry, I believe it was, mentioned secret leaked documents from the Chinese Communist Party. Well, this was a secret government document that was leaked in 2002, February 2002, to reveal the covert campaign of persecution against religious believers. And it said that they had the names, addresses, and photographs of 23,686 Chinese Christians recently arrested for their faith, 20,000 beaten, 129 killed, and so on. It went on to say, in addition to the list of victims, they had secret copies of correspondence written by Beijing government officials. And some of them, these leaked documents, came from secret police in China. All these officials confirmed that their superiors knew that their orders and memoranda would result in severe persecution of peaceful Chinese religious groups. I've never seen anything like it in such quantity, said Robin Monroe, a China specialist at London School of Oriental and African Studies. These documents are from all around the country, all consistent, all quite draconian, and expressing implacable hostility toward these groups. And of course, we know that the CCP has implacable hostility towards religious freedom and democracy. Then in 2005, on the 6th anniversary of the banning of Falun Gong, I spoke, as I did every year, at the lawn of the U.S. Capitol. And my point that year was stop the appeasement of the Chinese Communist Party. Just a bit of what I said that day, July 20th. The great Russian human rights hero Natan Sharansky has revealed to the world that it was when the policy of appeasement stopped that the days of the Soviet Union were numbered. The Institute on Religion and Democracy urges the United States government to fully reject the policy of appeasement. Appeasement enables the murderous thugs of the Chinese Communist Party to continue to harass, arrest, imprison, persecute, torture, and kill the most peaceful and honorable citizens of China, those who believe in truth and freedom, and those who follow the practices of truth, benevolence, and forbearance. Appeasement enables the government of China to defy universal covenants on refugees and forcibly repatriate desperate North Korean refugees to almost certain death. And appeasement allowed the Chinese Communist Party to take over other ethnic groups in the region as well. And then finally, I would say to the incoming administration of President Donald Trump, this is our plea: stop the appeasement of the Chinese Communist Party. And because of the season we're in, where we're getting close to Christmas, I just wanted briefly finish with a story where we heard about the arrest of a secret Christmas Eve service that was going on with Christians from the underground church in China, and how the people at that service had been arrested and put in prison. And my late boss at the time, Diane Nippers, said, we need to do something, because at that point, I can't remember what year it was, but it was during the Obama administration, people in America were getting pretty cowardly about even using the phrase Merry Christmas. You may remember it was like, oh, happy holidays. I hope you have a nice time. Nobody would say Merry Christmas. And we said these people were willing to risk their lives and their freedom to celebrate Christmas in China. How dare we be cowardly about saying that we believe in Christmas? So we made buttons, and I've got a picture of it. I've also got 7 of them. So if anybody wants one, that's like all we have left. It's like collector's items. Just come up to me later and I'll give the 7 away. But I hope I have this right side up. This way. Thank you, Stephen. This was the button that we made that said Merry Christmas. And we said, when you wear this button, be proud. And when people say, well, what does your button say? Say, it says Merry Christmas in Chinese. And I'm wearing it on behalf of the people who are being persecuted for celebrating Christmas in China. And because we still have the freedom to say it. So that was just an idea of how the Chinese people who believe in freedom and democracy and are so courageous have given courage to people in other countries as well. That not only is Falun Gong and the Uyghur people and the people who have stood up to the CCP of all kinds, as well as the Christians in the underground church and even in the Three Self movement, not only are they giving a blessing to the people of China by eroding the evil of the CCP, but they have given a blessing to those of us who are trying to stand up for freedom and democracy around the world, and given us courage, because as somebody once said, courage is contagious. So thank you.
Now I'm going to invite Abdou Satir Abdouali. He is the coordinator for Uyghur refugees at the Campaign for Uyghurs.
Hello, good afternoon. First, I want to acknowledge that Rushan Abbas, the executive director of Campaign for Uyghurs, is currently traveling and wasn't able to speak here today. And I'm honored to share this platform on her and CFU's behalf, representing the countless Uyghur families who continue to suffer under the CCP's genocide. Rushan's story is deeply connected to my own. Starting in 2017, numerous relatives of ours went missing, including members of Rushan's husband's family, who are also my second cousin, Abdul Hakim Idris's relatives. These were our uncles, aunts, cousins, our loved ones. When Rushan spoke out in September 2018, the CCP retaliated by abducting her sister, Dr. Gulshan Abbas, exemplifying a regime that punishes any dissent. I grew up in East Turkestan, where life under Chinese rule made it impossible to live freely or dignity. The CCP denied me the right to practice my religion or live in freedom without persecution. In 2015, I fled my homeland, spending years in Turkey and Saudi Arabia before finally reaching the United States, a country I'm proud to call home. For the past year, I've helped fellow Uyghurs with their asylum process, serving as a translator and assisting with legal documentation. Last month, despite of the harsh reality of Uyghurs facing fledged active genocide in our homeland, my own asylum application was denied. A devastating reality shared by many Uyghurs who are desperate to rebuild their lives in safety. The United States, both previous Trump administration and current administration, has led the world in recognizing the genocide in the Uyghur region. Yet the small number of Uyghurs here, a few hundred, still face immense barriers to securing asylum. We're not asking for handouts. We're asking for a chance to grow our families, to preserve our culture, and contribute to this great country. Many young Uyghurs dream of serving the United States, whether it's in the military, public service, other fields. They are deeply grateful for the freedoms this country offers and want to give back. But without legal status, these are only dreams. Organizations like Epoch Times are steadfast in their commitment to freedom and truth, values the CCP works to destroy. Platforms like this amplify our voices, exposing the lies of authoritarian regime. It's not enough for the CCP to persecute Uyghurs within the Uyghur region. It reaches into the diaspora, pressuring other countries to deport Uyghurs and those who have escaped, and silencing those who have escaped. China's hunger for control is unending, and it threatens universal values of freedom, dignity, and justice. Let me end with this. The Uyghur people are not just survivors. We're builders. We seek to live in peace, ensuring that our children who have escaped genocide can thrive in freedom. But we need your help. We need this country, the leader of the free world, to protect those fleeing genocide and give us the chance to rebuild what we have lost. Thank you for standing with us in this fight for freedom and justice. Thank you all.
Thank you. So now, thank you all for staying with us. We're running a few minutes late. We're down to our final speaker, Se-Hoon Kim. He's a journalist and he's a captive nations advocate. I'll get him to explain what that is.
Thank you, Jan. Well, firstly, it's an honor to be here among all of you. A few days ago, I had a phone call with Jan and about this particular event, and when I picked up the phone, I was actually at the White House waiting for the press briefing to start. And after I said, look, I'd be happy to speak, and I hung up the phone, I went into the press briefing room, and one of the things I've noticed was that, and again, this Korean Jean-Pierre didn't come out yet, and so a lot of the seats were empty. But then I couldn't help but to have this thought where, imagine all of these journalists, especially the first two rows, right, that get a lot of the questions on TV, asking about the plight of the Uyghur people, of the Falun Gong community, of the Southern Mongolians, Tibetans, Hongkongers, Chinese Catholics and Protestants who are underground. Imagine every single one of them actually saying something about it. I say this because I was actually one of the only journalists in the State Department that brought this question since last year. And the only response that, unfortunately, that we've gotten from this administration was that we care about this issue, but hang on tight, there's something coming. Well, to my disappointment, a lot of it didn't come. A lot of the expectations that we had did not come. When a lot of the questions that we pose as journalists, when we do ask about these questions, as you have witnessed, comes back with either the same question or you really don't get any question and answer at all. And the reason why I'm sharing with you today is that when we pose these questions to any administration, be it the Biden administration or the incoming Trump administration, the answers really speak a lot about the environment that we're living in. And I guess one thing that I should share is that for many years now, I've been seeing a trend of an ongoing vicious cycle, especially on the Hill and everywhere else, is that a lot of these issues, be it the Falun Gong issue, the East Turkestan issue, Southern Mongolian issue, or Tibetan issue, whatever it may be, is that there is a cycle of focusing on the aspect of human rights and human rights only. Now, human rights is extremely important and it deserves all of our attention. But unfortunately, it becomes the only factor of discussion here. When I discuss with my colleagues about a specific action set by the Congress and set by the powers that be over the years as to what should be done, there's a lot of beautiful words being said, yet there's always a room for debate as to whether or not they're being done. After how many pictures, after how many committee hearings where we see this grand presentation of these issues being brought in, let me just pose a question to all of you. How many of you can actually say that something concrete was actually done? I don't think any of us, I think every one of us will have a different answer for that. And I would like to also take this opportunity to especially congratulate our community from the Southern Mongolian community, where for the first time there is a bipartisan bill focusing on thanks to Senator Markley, focusing on the ongoing situation of Southern Mongolia in the Senate, and it has just been introduced this year. And this was after being told for years by the powers that be, and especially folks on the Hill, that, you know what, we'll work on it, or there's too many communities that we need to work on, but we'll look into it eventually. But it was actually the activists and the community members themselves being persistent in their fight for freedom. And I see the same thing with the Falun Gong community. Now, a little about myself. I need to let you know is that I was a huge advocate or a sympathizer of the CCP in the past, during high school. In 2008, as all of you remember, China put out this grand show of the pre-Olympic ceremony where they show the changing China, the great, beautiful aspect of China that no one can deny. And at that point, even at that young age, I realized, well, this is the only country that has both the aspect of the ideology that I felt attracted to, which is Marxism, where everyone is given equal opportunity, but with also the aspect of wealth combined with it together. Of course, I was deceived, right? And actually, one of the most hated communities in my mind and the likes of me in the past were the Falun Gong community. I remember sitting during my high school world history class, world religion class, a friend of mine actually did a whole presentation about the persecution of Falun Gong, and I remember standing up and telling her, that is a lie. China's trying to do better, and you're being the arm of a whole other power that are trying to ruin China. Interesting, right? But all of that actually changed when I met up with a Falun Gong practitioner in the middle of winter, in the streets of Flushing, who was willing to talk to me, no matter what I believed, no matter who I was. And when she shared with me about the situation with her sister and the plight that her family was going through, that's when something clicked inside of me. And it was that one personal testimony that truly changed everything. Because I didn't realize that someone of a Chinese origin who grew up in the system to be able to come out and say, look, I'm from there and let me tell you my story. I share this with all of you today to remind you of one thing, is that yes, we have representatives here who's really supposed to be the speakers of the districts or the communities that you represent, but you have a voice also. If it took one lady in the streets of Flushing, right by the Queen's Library, and I'm sure many of you know where that is, to have this simple conversation to turn a very twisted individual like myself, or to at least start breaking this whole mirage of the beautiful China under the CCP. And you can look at my story. There's a bunch of them online. Every single one of you can make a difference that really we haven't seen before. Look at the Southern Mongolians. For the first time in history, their bill was being told. After being told multiple times that, well, this is essentially not a priority for us right now. But they've achieved it. So, in conclusion, I would like to tell you is that you saw the word captive nations when Jan introduced me first. We're, in a sense, right now, we live in a captive nations world. Like myself, there were so many people out there, and Ms. Shi mentioned how children are not being given free trips to China, and I don't find that surprising, to really see the grandeur of China, right? And it'll look really attractive, it'll look really great, but one thing will be missing, the aspect of freedom. And every single one of you can attest to all of that. We are, and the other thing I would like to share is that there are communities from those of East Turkestan, Southern Mongolia, Tibet, Hong Kong, and the Falun Gong community, and again, with the Catholic and the Protestant community that were underground, one thing they teach us is this, is that we can always become captive under a dictatorial system if we do not pay attention and if we do not fight for our rights. And all of you being here today, and all the Falun Gong practitioners being on the streets, just telling the truth out there, is a fight of its own. And Mr. Destros actually mentioned that that's a war is not really the way. I agree, because a greater war is being waged by all of you, a war of information, but actually this sense of hope that you have kindled in so many people's lives, whether you know it or not. I'm a Korean American student in the middle of New Jersey who never expected to even come across folks like you. And I have all of you to thank for that here. And the reason why I'm sitting here today is because of all of you. And there's going to be many, many people like me who are going to be coming and sharing different stories here, sharing the same stories here with you today in the future, if you keep continuing the fight. So I thank you to the whole Falun Gong community for being so vigilant, but also at the same time, I also thank the Epoch Times and the NTD News for carrying on this information fight. Because again, as a journalist now, in conclusion, it humbles me every day to know that a network like Epoch Times, which has come across so much challenge and persecution over the years, I mean here at the United States, on behalf of mass news media, they have held on extremely, extremely strong. And I'm proud to sit with them be it at the State Department, at the White House, and now I'm coming in the Pentagon, and to just bring the light of truth to whoever is in the administration. I have a lot of hopes for the incoming Trump administration that they will do the right thing. But again, just know that the status quo of keeping it within just in the realm of human rights is over. And I believe when we have achieved all of that, when we have gathered all of that through in that aspect, we can actually see a huge change come, not just in China and to the rest of the world. And the moment China becomes free, the whole world becomes free, because right now we are under the grip of the CCP in some way, shape, or form, whether it be through the BRI or in the small minds of small students here in Loudoun County and being elsewhere. And so I look forward to the day of celebrating that day of global independence with all of you. And that is really achievable. And thank you again for helping me to realize that is a possibility. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Sehun. Well, so we've now come to the end of our program. There's one thing that we didn't mention. If you're out there watching, okay, and you know somebody who might be interested in quitting the Chinese Communist Party, or you yourself are watching and you want to quit the Chinese Communist Party, The website to go to for the Global Service Center is tuidang.org. That's in Chinese. If you want it in English, it's global.tuidang.org. And, you know, it's a great opportunity, as we've been discussing here, to cleanse oneself of this system, of this specter as it's been described. Thank you all again, and we'll see you back again sometime.